How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Stupid Questions podcast. Today on the pod, we're going to be talking with Matt Schuster. He is the co-founder and CEO of a company called ADDRA. ADDRA Labs, excuse me. They make really awesome protein bars, and Matt is an awesome guy for a number of reasons. You'll get to hear some of his backstory and the things that he's overcome, like just severe debilitating depression, to starting this new business, to being in the advertising world for 15 years, to qualifying for Kona, to being a successful father and husband, a number of other things. So it's a really good conversation with Matt. Really appreciate him coming on. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Matt Schuster to ship it to your place.
Oh, that was it took a bit.
Yeah, I've ordered some fun stuff on Temu.
The
Um,
best is when you order something and you get something completely different.
mhm.
We ordered mailers, like the envelopes that we used to pack and ship some of the boxes, and a box came, and instead of mailers, it was three pairs of like gamer microphones or gamer headphones.
Oh,
I'm
seriously?
like, this isn't even close. Like,
Yeah, not even remotely. That is wild. One time I ordered the coolest thing I ever ordered, I think was a what was it? It was like a crossbow, a mini crossbow that shot toothpicks. I bought it in college. It was like back when Timo first started. But yeah, anyway. Well, Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. I forget how we got connected. Was it through who was it through that introduced us?
it's Connor.
Connor. That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Sweet.
Connor,
Well, yeah.
he's a character.
Yeah. Thanks so much for getting connected with me, man. So where are you at right now?
Yeah, so I'm in northern New Jersey and
Okay.
just outside of New York City.
Yeah. So
And
you're skipping
yeah,
lunch for
was
me.
pumped when Connor. So we connected probably like 4 or 5 months ago. We had known each other just through the industry. Like he was doing On Your Left for a while, and um, before we were at ADDRA, I was actually working at Power Bar. So our paths had crossed kind of briefly, but really got to know each other when after we started ADDRA, and we were just chatting about ideas and ways that he could potentially help us scale the business, and we could help him scale his media empire that he's building.
Yeah.
And then he's like, "Yeah, there's this guy I got introduced to. He does this awesome podcast, and you should definitely go on it." I was like, "Let's do it, man."
Yeah, sweet. That's awesome. O'Connor's a good guy. It's fun been getting to connect with him and learn his ways over the years. But yeah, so what I would love to do is first kind of go into some backstory questions, getting to know you a bit, and then obviously we'll talk about ADRA and is that how I pronounce it? It is
You
ADRA.
nailed it, man. You
Okay,
got it
good, good,
first
good.
try.
Sweet, sweet. So we'll go through that and just have some ins and outs questions. So, but the first question I would love to dive into is, from your perspective, who is Matt?
So I have listened to a few episodes, so I
Okay,
kind of thought
nice.
this one might be coming.
Yeah, good.
Um, it So if you asked me this question a few years ago, you probably would have gotten a very different answer. So the way I describe it is, um, I'm currently in Act Two of my adult life, as I'd say it. So prior to anything related to endurance, I had an entire career in life in the corporate world, and it was very much a follow the bouncing ball of go to school, get a job, progressing job, continue to climb the ladder. That's your goal, and that defines who you are. And then around 2019, I like to say I took the sabbatical pre-COVID. Before taking a sabbatical was cool, and that is when Act Two started because I really did find the answer to that question. And what it really comes down to is in addition to what Matt is, which is a father, an athlete, an entrepreneur, but who he is really a serial optimist. Someone that's always sees the opportunity in things, ways that things could improve, things people could achieve. That served me in my previous life, but it's really become front and center as this new genre of my life and career has developed. And it's been really fun getting to know kind of me as a person and all the different elements that were overlooked for so many years.
Yeah, yeah. Good answer. Thank you for taking the time to unload that a bit. but I'm curious for you because, serial optimism goes hand in hand, I would say, with being a serial entrepreneur. Um, just because it takes an optimist to believe when before anything has materialized. So I'm curious for you as you look back on your past now, because hindsight's 2020, how young were you when you think you can first start to identify some of the characteristics and the tenacity and drive to start or sell or do things like entrepreneurship when you were younger?
So the career path I chose was sales. So in a way, it's an entrepreneurial career path in general.
Hmm.
But my success in that area came from this. There's kind of two types of salespeople. There's the sort of driven, numbers oriented, hammer away, do as many phone calls, hit your quotas kind of thing. And then there's more of the, I guess I'd call it the opportunistic salesperson that sees growth and abundance in different places. For me, I always found that the management that I would work for, the philosophies and the direction that they gave never really made sense to me. And it would be, you have to make sure you're hitting X amount of phone calls and this many follow-ups and this many meetings and this much entertainment. And to me, it was like, if I'm going to approach JP Morgan Chase and try to bring them on as a client for our marketing solution, I don't know necessarily like calling them 100 times is going to translate into success. It's going to be, well, what strategic opportunity do we create that could provide them something that they don't already have? And then how can we position that? Who do we have to talk to? Call it strategic selling, call it what you want. It was very much seeing and creating the opportunity, and it never jived with management, but the numbers always were there. So
Hmm.
that was kind of the early, I guess, identification of, I think a little bit differently than most that are in my field right now.
Yeah. What would you chalk up that thinking differently mentality from? Is that more of a nature or a nurture thing?
Um, I would say probably more of a nature. I was the classic what if, why not kid.
Hmm.
So every single thing is like, well, what if we did this?
Yeah.
Or why couldn't we do that? Why can't I be president? Why can't? And I don't know that um it's not something that was instilled. It was just kind of something that happened.
Hmm. Is there any entrepreneurship or sales in your family, like from your parents?
Yeah, my father, he was it is uncanny, but his trajectory was similar in different aspect. He was in sales, different industry, progressed, went up to a leadership position, and then roughly around the same age decided to step away and start
Mhm.
his own thing.
Oh, really?
And he was essentially an entrepreneur from, around 40 years old, maybe late 30s, through to, when he officially retired, um, running different sales consulting businesses. And he had a few different clients and a few different things that he was doing, but it was all kind of around the same theme of, I'm an independent sales rep that I can kind of translate this skill across and own it for myself.
Yeah. Do you think he's proud of what you've done or what you're doing?
Oh yeah, yeah. I am lucky in that I get regular updates every single time we put out a social media post. Like that was a good one,
Yeah.
which
I
is
love
awesome,
it.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. That is awesome. It's good to get the feedback from parents for sure. When you can step back and say that like your parents are proud of what you do. I think that people who don't have that don't see how much of a benefit it can be. And there's a balance too, because I think that some parents can be kind of like, I don't know, overly supportive of things that are not going to work out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think they can definitely just be an over cheerleader
Hmm.
and you know, give the kid the keys and let him drive kind of thing.
Yeah.
But no, he's definitely been, both my parents have been super supportive, but also they're very quick. My mom more so than my dad would be like, "Have you thought this through? Like,
Hmm.
you're okay, right? Like things are good. And I was like, yes, yes. She's like the kind of the balance and the check.
Okay.
Um, yeah, she's the check to I guess the optimism does come a bit from the nurture side from my dad.
Yeah. Yeah. Was your mom primarily stay-at-home mom, take care of you?
Not 100%. So it was, dual income household. So, um, my dad had his businesses that he was running, and then, she would have jobs, locally, in different areas. So she, worked in retail for a period of time, and it was, really just to make ends meet,
Hmm.
on the household finance side.
Yeah. Were you guys growing up there in New Jersey?
No, no, I committed a cardinal sin moving to New Jersey. I
Oh,
grew up
man.
in Long Island, and we are. You want to talk about nurture? We are nurtured to hate New Jersey, and
Why is that?
they said couldn't tell you.
It's just such a
No,
territorial gang
no,
thing.
no. Maybe it was back from when Jersey Shore was big on MTV, but yeah, we're like we get the blowouts. Like that's our thing. Like, oh. Um, but no, I grew up in Long Island and then went to school in upstate New York and then worked in New York City. So I've covered the entire
Yeah.
state of New York. And then when it was time to settle down, New Jersey just made a lot more sense.
Yeah.
So we moved out here.
Yeah. Did you meet your wife in New Jersey?
We met in college.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. How long have you been married?
We are 2011, 14, right? Yeah, 14 years.
Yeah, congratulations, man.
Yeah,
Almost 15.
almost.
Yeah. And then
It's
you have, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, yeah. So, we have two kids. So Jack and Max. Jack turns 10 this month, and then Max is 6. And it's funny. In many cases, the younger brother is the older brother,
Hmm.
which is very entertaining.
Yeah, I'm sure. Were you an only child?
No, no. I've got a brother and a sister. I'm the
Okay.
oldest of three.
Okay, interesting. So then you have that experience, then the perspective of what it was like growing up in that, watching your two boys. I'm sure that gives a lot of flavor to your life.
It gives a lot of flavor, but it also makes a lot more sense for how the dynamic in our household was.
Hmm.
And, because I think you have siblings as well, right? Are you the
Hmm.
oldest or the
Yeah,
youngest?
I'm the oldest. I have two younger sisters.
So the oldest gets away with nothing,
Hmm.
and then parents are always hardest on the older child, and the youngest gets away with murder. And for the longest time, I never understood why. Now I've got two kids. I'm like, no, I understand why.
Yeah.
Your
Why?
expectations
Explain it
are
to me because I don't have kids yet.
because you get a frame of reference to balance off of.
Mm.
So if you have an only child and they're 10 and they start to do things that may not be indicative of a 10-year-old, you're like, oh, okay, well, whatever. But if you have a 10 and a 6 and you see the 10-year-old doing something that was more the behavior of a 6-year-old, and then my older son Jack has the disadvantage of my 6-year-old is wise beyond his years, so he acts more like he's 10. So you've got this comparison that happens in real time all the time, and you constantly are like having to parent up to the 10-year-old. So it
Interesting.
inevitably ends up being, harder on the older.
Yeah.
When really it's just like, you're playing down and we want you to play up kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Thanks for sharing that. So I'm curious with you, like being married, almost 15 years, you have two young boys. In 2019, you decide to leave the advertising industry. Um, for better or for worse, that is a huge risk. So tell me, as like a man, provider for the family, what was kind of going on internally for you when you were making those decisions to step out on your own and take the risk of starting ADRA?
Well, there was a lot of steps between that day and Adra.
Okay, you can walk through every single one of them.
but yeah, and I've talked about this a couple times publicly, but I actually um, leaving in 2019 was more of a decision from a mental health perspective. And I had basically burned myself down to a point with the way I was progressing. Um, wasn't completely functional and was on a path that was not going to end well, and made a hard decision that said I'd either step away from a livelihood and become healthy and alive, or continue down the path, and who knows where this could, probably not lead to a very good place. And I had, my wife, God bless her, she was there for the entire, you know, transition, and she was there for the beginning of the kind of downslide. Um, and we talked through it quite a bit, and ultimately she was the one that I give her 100% of the credit. It got to a point where I couldn't even get myself out of bed to go to work.
Wow.
And uh, and I remember one Monday, it was probably like October, November, and I hadn't slept at all. I was up all night. Couldn't get myself to physically sit up and get myself to go to work. And she just looked at me and she goes, "You're going to quit your job today." And I said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah." She goes, "No, no, no, no. You're going to quit your job today." I said, "You're right. You're right." When we look at it and you lay it out, like, that is the thing, that's driving us in this direction, and unfortunately, that's the thing that has to change. So I walked in, I had a conversation with my CEO, and at the time I was the you know chief executive of revenue, and it's not a job you just don't show up anymore. So there was a discussion, a transition plan, and eventually it was around February when I actually stepped away. Um, but it was, once I got out and once I was home. Um, Granted, we were all locked down, so everyone was home.
Sure.
But the real, like, the real damage became very apparent. And when you've lost basically 100% of your self-worth because you've had this constant negative, intrusive narrative in your head that's just developed and built over time and over time, um, it doesn't just go away. So you have to work to get it to subside and go from a full roar to just a dull whisper to eventually, you know, it pops in and out, but you can recognize it. Um, and that took me like 6 months. 6 months of just couldn't do, like, wasn't doing anything, wasn't looking for a job, was just kind of focusing on being home, being a parent, being myself, getting healthy physically and mentally. Um, and then ultimately, it's what led me back to becoming an athlete as a kind of a proxy for getting healthy again. Because I was an athlete in college or growing up. Played Division I lacrosse, and then basically spent 15 years not being an athlete. And then when this happened, it was all right. Well, we've got to get healthy. 45 pounds overweight, our cholesterol's through the roof. We are by all means on the wrong end of the spectrum. Started running, started riding a bike, and then someone's like, "Oh, you should do a triathlon." And then we all know how that goes, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then that really did, it created a platform to heal off of. And ultimately it kind of progressed into a career path, and what led me to get to ADDRA at some point.
Yeah. Wow. So
I
many
don't
things.
So yeah.
No, no, it's really good. And I want to kind of pick apart some of those moments and talk about them. So if I ever pry too much, just let me know. But
No, go for it.
I'm going to dive in. Well, going back to the career, you're talking about 15 years, but you were really touching on this point of almost like this concept, the inner critic, where you have this voice that becomes a whisper and then a scream until it like drowns you out. So, just for full context, I have only experienced a depression similar to that for like a short period of time, maybe a couple of months. Like, it wasn't too long after my father passed away, but to that point, I had never really experienced what that was like. It was like I'd wake up for 5 minutes, I'd feel okay, and then it's just like this overwhelming sense of just like darkness descends on you, and like you said, don't even want to move. So to to come out of that and to start to battle against or figure out what the game plan is to confront those voices inside the head of the things like the destruction of belief that you have in yourself. I guess my first question is, how did you put voice to those to where you've had to face them, and then how did you start to deny them the authority over who you were?
Yeah, it's that was a big one, which was one, deconstructing and separating the voice from me,
Mm.
because when you're in it, you just hear it, and it's you, because it's coming from you. It's coming from in your own head. It's your own voice that you recognize. But for me, the biggest sort of transition point back towards improving was understanding and recognizing that that voice is not me. Just by nature of me hearing it, it means it's not me. And um, that's when I started to do a bit more research, and started reading and listening to different books, different podcasts, and understanding the concept of um, being stuck in a parasympathetic state or sympathetic state, whichever one. I always forget which one. But
It's over my head,
essentially,
but either one sounds
yeah,
good.
yeah. Essentially, you're stuck in fight or flight, and that no, that's the sort of final outcome of what caused all the symptoms to occur. But understanding that, oh, this is a defense mechanism of the body. It's used to keep you safe, and those alarm bells and the screaming, the yelling inside is my body interpreting danger. So I need to recognize that it's not actually, it's saying, terrible things, but it's doing it because it interprets that the situation I'm in, I need to leave. And being able to just identify the systems at play was helpful, and just understanding it. But then where things really started to improve was going back up the chain of, all right, well, why am I in this state? And what that came down to was every human being needs some sort of sense of validation. It's just intrinsically part of who we are. But where that validation comes from is key to being very strong mentally. If that comes from yourself and internally through your own standards, you can progress and be very confident and very healthy from a mental perspective. If you construct your validation system like many of us do at a young age from others, then you're essentially dependent upon other people telling you that you've done good or done well. Um, and accelerate that up to the highest levels in whatever capacity, in work, in sport, and that validation comes fewer and farther between, and rarely is it genuine.
Mm,
So when you're all of a sudden the well runs dry and you have no point of validation to justify for yourself, and you don't have any internal validation system set up, it's a slippery slope. And that's essentially where I had gotten to. I was, climbed the ladder, I did good. I got a promotion. I did good. I did this. I've always had that. And then when I got to the top ranks, there is nobody, right? Like, there's me and the CEO, and you're not really, yeah, they're your boss, but really you're more business partners. So
mhm,
there's nobody checking your work. There's nobody, it's more of an expectation that things go well.
mm,
And that's a hard lesson for a lot of executives to make that transition up. Um, and it really is the folks that have um, built their own systems for validation and for progression as a human. They're going to succeed in roles like that. And that's really, once I identified that, my goal was, all right, that's what I need to build for myself.
mm,
And that's what I'm going to focus on for the next, year, 2 years. So I don't like making money right now. We've saved, we're very frugal with our expenses, and like financially we were okay for a period of time, but I said, that's the thing that needs to change. And if we can fix that, we can have a much healthier, happier, and more fulfilling life. So
mm. Yeah, wow. There's so many interesting points there too. So what you were saying about the external versus internal validation, I feel like in a perfect world, external validation would be the place we probably should get that from. But the problem is when you have, I mean, just crappy people, because hurt people, you have this just terrible cycle where we end up tearing each other down. But it's also interesting too because on like the topic of selfishness, all growing up, I thought of selfishness as like, oh, I want to have the car and I want to have this, and it's kind of like this what I want. But then there's this other type of selfishness, and this might be a little controversial to say, and I'm not 100% sold that it's 100% true, but it's like the selfishness of whenever we're talking to ourselves negatively. And just really quick, I had this profound moment happen to me where I did this exercise where we had to, in this group, write down all of the inner critic voices. And then we had to say them to ourselves out loud and like walking in a circle. And then, have you heard of this before?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then the music stops and they're like, okay, now take open this envelope. And this envelope, unbeknownst to us, like was a picture of our us as like a kid, and then we were asked, like, would you
Wow.
say these things to yourself? Dude, I broke down. I
I
cried
bet.
like a baby because it took us something like that to make me realize, like, oh, this is the form of selfishness that I continually indulge in. I'm talking down and bad to myself. And words are so powerful, It's like crazy
Yeah.
what
Oh
they can
yeah.
do.
And it's crazy how like your brain will knows exactly how to cut to the core, and
Hmm.
it'll hit you with like nobody will say anything to you worse than what you will say to yourself in your own head, because you know deep down where your biggest insecurities lie. And man, I think it was Peter Attia. I can't remember if it was a book or a podcast, but he had talked about kind of going through something similar. And one of the exercises they had him do is anytime those thoughts come in, he had to either leave himself a voicemail or create a voice memo, and then later go back and listen to it. And he would hear the things that he was saying to himself in his head, and he's like, "Oh my God!" Like actually hearing it from his own voice out loud was a surreal experience. I never did any exercise like that, but I can 100% relate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. So I grew up in like a Christian house, and this biblical concept of like God speaking the world into existence has changed its meaning for me because if we think about, giving each other life and death by our words, like we literally have the power to affect someone on a chemical level, bringing life or death. So it's just like words
Yeah.
are so powerful.
Well, I think that and could be transition, but what I've also found is the opposite is true as well. So just like your narrative can break you down completely, changing that to the sort of opportunist or view of potential can do the same thing. It's kind of like that book, The Secret. Like if you speak it, it can exist, which is kind of like to your point um, that you just made, and that's really for me. That's when things started to transition from like, okay, I'm developing myself to, okay, it's time to pursue,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden it's like, well, why can't I do an Ironman? Like other people, other humans do it. I can do it. Or like, why can't we start a business? Or why can't we, you know, do a career pivot? And like humans do these things all the time, and I'm no different than any other human. And all of a sudden, that perspective change was like, wow, we really could do anything. It's
Yeah.
just a matter of do we have the confidence to focus and drive and do the work it's going to take to get there.
Yeah. So as you started to, I guess, really piece back together the framework of how you would operate internally, and you get into triathlon, you're signing up for the Ironmans, you're getting podiums, you make it to Kona. At what point did you start to entertain and put stock in the idea of like, oh, okay, I think it's time to start something new? And I'm again, you're going to be at the top. I mean, you're an executive again. You're not going to have that someone looking over your shoulder. So how did you start to operate and make that work?
Um, so the venture of it's actually kind of funny. Um, After about 6 months of just not working, I pitched my family, and I still
Okay.
have the deck, but
You like made a
Created
deck.
a
I love
pitch
it.
deck to my wife and then my kids, and my kids were much younger at that point. But I sat them down on the couch and I said, I want to take 1 year and just train as a triathlete. I'm not going to chase for a job. I'm not going to pursue anything that makes money. I'm just going to pursue myself in the sport. I don't know why, but something is pushing me in that direction, and I feel like I need to do that. And I broke down like the finances, and I essentially was pitching them as if I was looking for investment
Yeah,
um,
which you were.
from them, which I was exactly right.
Investment of time and money. Yeah.
Yeah, and they got such a kick out of it. My pitch to them was, if we do this, my goal will be for all of us to go to Hawaii if I qualify, or what? Or sorry, when I qualify. And that was in 2020. We didn't go to Hawaii until 2024, which in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have told my 5-year-old at the time, like, hey,
You'll
we're going
be
to be
9.
going to every single race. I came back. He's like, so are we going to Hawaii? I'm like, no,
Oh man, yeah,
every
that'll
single one.
play on the run on the marathon. Yeah.
Actually, it was, are we going to the volcanoes? I was like, no, not this time,
Oh,
buddy.
so cute.
And so I pitched and did that, and then and fully just dove into it. Hired a coach. I had my budget, so I bought the bike I could afford and started just immersing myself. And triathlons, endurance sport in general, but triathlon in particular, is so amazing because it checks every box. Like if you're into physical fitness, obviously there's lots of stimulation. If you're into gear, there's lots of stimulation. If you're into science, there's tons of it. And it's just, there's so much to dive into. And I kept on finding myself gravitating towards the nutrition science side of things. I was just very, very uh, interested and intrigued about how the body just takes in, utilizes, and expels energy throughout the training and then throughout the day, and just kind of read and immersed myself a ton. Um, Not looking to do anything with it, just really was interested in it appealed to me. And then it was actually September, my first season, I qualified for 70.3 Worlds in St. George. And I was training for it, and a week out, I crashed
My goodness.
and full, collarbone, shoulder blade, rib, like was done, wasn't training. And it was the first real injury I'd had in, year and a half of doing the sport, and went from full activity to no activity. And I was first I panicked. I was like, oh no, this thing that saved me is now taken away. But then it was like, no, you're okay. That'll heal. But what are you gonna do with this downtime? And started just typing away and just dumping thoughts into a document. Just everything I kind of absorbed over the year and a half. And it ended with this, 40, 50 page Word doc. And I was like, what is this? And I was like, maybe it's a book. I'll write a book. And my wife was like, yeah, maybe you should just show it to somebody first before you do that. And I had a friend that was at Penguin Publishing, and I was like, hey, I think I have a book. And he read it. He's like, that's not a book. Sorry, bud. No, no, no. But it could be a cool blog. And I was like, all right, maybe I'll make a blog. So I made it, and it was called Age Grouper. Um, and then that was really the first step into entrepreneurship, because then it was like, oh, well, maybe this could be, a media destination. And created a website, started bringing on writers, started creating social account and social presence, and started to catch a little bit of momentum. The followers started to grow. But I had zero business model. I had no way to monetize it. And but I caught the bug of like, I think I want to do something like this for a living. Learned a ton about, working within social media and the backbone and infrastructure of driving traffic to a website. And then lo and behold, right when I was at the point where I was like, there's no way to monetize this right now, I got to do something else, I got introduced to my now partner, Eric Zaltis, who was running Power and he had been with the company for over 25 years,
Yeah, they've been around a while.
predominantly in R&D. Um, we talk about how he was part of the team, and he was leading the team that developed the first research around dual source carbohydrate. And so we can all thank Eric and Oscar and the folks that were working on that research for the 2-to-1 glucose to fructose ratio that we have
Hmm.
today. Um, and he had taken on the distribution of PowerBar. So he wasn't running R&D or product, but yeah, he was just running sales in the American. Needed some help with social media, needed some help with e-commerce. And I was like, hey, I just learned all this. Let's do it. So joined with them, worked together for a couple of years, and then got to a point where we were like, we have no control over the product, the brand, the messaging, the positioning. And he's like, I'm an R&D guy. I've got like 12 products that are just on the shelf, that are just collecting dust, never going to see the light of day. And they're all innovative and they're not on the market today. It's like, what do you think of let's, start something new and bring these products to market and give them a real shot. Uh, and I said, sign me up. Let's do it. Like, where do I sign the check?
Yeah.
And I said, great. What's the first product we're doing? And he's like, a protein bar. And I was like, ooh, another one? But then, there was a whole story behind why a protein bar, why now? Um, and once he kind of walked me through the science behind it, I was like, all right, now I'm intrigued and now it makes a lot more sense. So we can launch with that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a crazy story, man. So, I mean, that again, that's a huge shift in the dynamic of what it means to be a provider. So, did you pitch your family again?
They were kind of part. So my actually I have it here. So that's my wife's name. So she was on board. So she says COO age grouper.
Yeah.
So she's been in it and part of this journey from day one. And every single venture that we've had, she has been a key contributor, a key component. Even now with ADDRA, like she's doing a lot of the operations on the back end um, for different parts of the business, which that has been so much fun. Because I always said like we should find a way to get the same job and or work at the same company. That would be fun. And it took us creating our own company to do that. So
Yeah. So, is Age Grouper still around as an entity?
the site's still up, but we don't do anything with it really anymore. Um, it kind of just functions as a park domain at this point.
Yeah, got it. So then with ADRA, like what is the science? What is the specifics? And I'm sure you told this story a million times, but now I'm curious because protein bars,
You.
most of them I hate. Yeah,
Not to you, not to your audience.
that's right. Let's hear it.
Yeah. So the first thing, and I'll kind of tell the story of how Eric kind of positioned it and pitched it to me because I think it really does sum it up. So he says there's three reasons, and three data points of why this bar should exist. Because the first one is, um, there's been so much research on the utilization and the processing of protein in the body for different walks of life, but they've predominantly been done on strength athletes or the sedentary population, and there's been very few that have been focused predominantly on endurance athletes. And the reason that's important is because when they actually did, and this is within the last few years, what they found was the protein intake needs are actually quite a bit higher than what you would expect in comparison to, say, like a strength athlete. So, for call it, I don't want to put numbers in case I'm wrong, but say a decade plus, the recommendation if you're a bodybuilder or power lifter or any sort of resistance-based athlete is 1.6 grams of protein for every kilogram of body weight per day. Um, what they found was that endurance athletes, and they classify that as anyone that's training upwards of 5 to 10 hours a day in a steady state exercise needs closer to 1.8 to 1.85 grams per day. And the reason for that is, unlike others, we do this steady state activity where we burn all types of fuel, mainly carbs, we burn some fat, but we also burn protein. And no other athletes do that because they're not doing this persistent exercise. So just by nature of we've used protein as fuel, primarily branched chain amino acids, we've got to replenish that. There's no protein storage facility on the body. You can store glycogen in your muscles, you can store fat as fat, but you can't store protein. So your intake needs to go much higher. And this is new. This is new science. There was just an article in Outside Magazine, Alex Hutchinson wrote, that was calling out this new focus, this new paradigm shift in protein for endurance. He's like, all right, so we've got this wave of, wow, protein or endurance athletes are going to recognize they need way more protein. One, he goes, number two, it's not just protein as a singular object, but it's actually the composition of the amino acids that make up that protein. And when you really dig into it, there's really only certain amino acids, or there are certain amino acids with a protein that are more important than others, particularly one called leucine. So leucine's an interesting one. It's one of the branched chain amino acids, or BCAAs. A lot of people will take that as a supplement. But what leucine does is it functions as a building block. So it's used as a raw material to create new body proteins, but it also functions as a trigger, or we like to call the dimmer switch. So when you eat a protein bar or a steak or anything that's got a decent amount, what happens is that your blood leucine level rises, and as that happens, that is what activates the muscle recovery process or muscle protein synthesis. And the higher you can get that blood leucine level, the more protein synthesis you can get to occur. So when we were talking through innovations, he said, one of the things you can do is you can increase just that component of the protein and not the rest of it, and you can have a more efficient protein bar. And I was like, but what about the recommendations based on total numbers? He says, yeah, those are important too. You do need to have some protein, but really what you're trying to get to is that 2.5 to 3 grams of leucine per serving. And then that flips on the switch all the way to 10. And then you're going to get the same recovery process. And that's where we really dug in. And there's been some research done just within the last, I would say, 12 months that proved out that case, where they took a lower protein count, higher leucine level, also biopsied a bunch of athletes. I don't know if you've ever had that done. I haven't, but man, that looks gruesome. You like stick a hole in your thigh and just take a chunk of muscle out. And yeah. But it's the only way to do it the right way. And so they did it. And the overwhelming response was, yeah, you can get 20 gram serving of protein with the equivalent leucine level of 30 grams, gives you the same response as 30 grams of protein in terms of how much you can rebuild muscle.
Yeah.
And he goes, nobody is doing that. Like, that is unheard of in the endurance space. There are products, general market in the strength world, mainly powders, but nobody has done it for an endurance athlete, and nobody has done it in a bar. And I said, all right. I go, what's the third point? He goes, go and look at every sports nutrition company's website that caters to our endurance world, and tell me how many have protein on the front page.
None of them.
None of them. They've all got a product. It's typically whey protein powder or plant protein powder in a bag, but it's not a primary focus point, right? Gels and carb drinks and electrolytes, that's where the money is, but nobody's really focusing in on it. So there's this odd white space in what would most people would look at as a very crowded market. And, he laid the kind of story out to me. I was like, that makes a lot of sense. Like, why doesn't this bar exist? Why has nobody really pursued this? Effectively what you end up with is the most efficient, effective recovery bar, um, that you can, throw in a bag or you can stick in a jersey pocket. And it's right when you're done with your hard session, you
Love
have
it.
the opportunity to maximize the return from that session,
Yeah.
to the full degree.
So just so I'm make sure I'm understanding correctly. So if I take like a regular protein bar, it's got 30 grams. You're saying that this one with 20 grams would be at the same efficiency level as the 30 grams because of the increased lysine,
Leucine.
leucine. Is
It
that
would
correct?
be it would create the same level of muscle protein synthesis as a 30-gram serving of whey protein, which
Yeah.
is considered to be the kind of gold standard of protein supplement sources.
Yeah.
Um, the other note about it is that all our bars are plant-based, which there's it wasn't necessarily a decision based on like trying to avoid dairy. But it was what we found was there's a benefit because plant sources are notoriously low in leucine. And this is a way where you, even if you're vegan or can't tolerate lactose, this is a way for you to get that leucine level, um, it, in a very efficient way. But there are a lot of bars out there that are using different plant sources, particularly soy, where if you wanted to get that full recovery, you'd have to eat upwards of 3 bars in one sitting.
Yeah.
And there's some big ones out there, big names that use soy protein as their base source. Um, and the leucine story, which I think is going to become a little bit more mainstream, does not bode well for those bars.
Yeah. So how have you found, because when I was in college, I started this company and it took a level of education to kind of show people, hey, this is why it's more expensive. This is what it's worth. So for you guys, obviously there's an education component here, and sometimes it just for whatever reason takes a while for things to catch on, like the high carb thing, like that kicked in, and everything else. So how's the education component been going, and is it tracking with your business trajectory of like sustainability to be able to hit growth and things like that?
Yeah, you're spot on. So it's education is the name of the game. We actually have 3 levels of education we need to do. So one, we need to educate people why they should care about protein.
Hmm.
And we need to educate them what protein is. And then it's like, okay, and here's why leucine's important. So there's this kind of 3-step. And the big what we found is the ideal scenario is if we can get 3 to 5 minutes with a person and just share a lot of what I just shared with you. And we do that at a lot of events. So we go to a lot of races. We partner up with a lot of teams, and we set up webinars so we can teach them and educate them, not just about ADDRA. It's really more about just this new wave of protein. And I like to say that just learning about it, there's 10 things you could do in your kitchen today that have nothing to do with buying an ADDRA bar that could actually improve your recovery and your performance. Um, and as we see is that the more we educate, the more we see people coming in and giving them a try. And then the more they try, the more we see people recurring. I think our, trial to repeat purchase rate, from what we've been told from partners and advisors we work with, is abnormally high. So that means I guess people like the way they taste at least.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the cool things we did was we actually built a calculator. So we took all this new science and threw it in a calculator that you put in your body weight, you put in your training volume, you put in your dietary preferences, and it'll give you, hey, here's where you should target a range of X grams to Y grams of protein per day. It'll tell you how to space it because spacing it throughout the day actually plays a big role. And then it'll tell you how much, if you're getting enough leucine or if you need to supplement with more. and then it gives anyone that takes it an opportunity to grab one of each bar for free. Because our big thing is like just try them, as many bars we put in people's mouths as possible.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, that's right on our website. It's just a daily protein calculator. Um, but every time we see it, we see people come in, they grab the sample pack, um, and then a large percentage of those then come back and try them again and put them into training.
I actually just took your 8 question survey.
Nice.
So how
What's
many
your what's
entry?
your what's your number?
Well, technically, I'm on question number 6, and I'm trying to decide preferred method for format of protein snack. I think it's just eating food. I don't know
Yeah.
what I say here. Whole food, plant-based protein. I mean, I'm pretty much vegetarian, so I'll probably say that. And then here we go. Plant-based proteins is probably what I do mostly. So mine is after I enter my email. Tick, 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 tick. How many of these have you had? Okay, 84 to 104 grams per day.
Are you eating that?
I don't count it, but I doubt it. How many's in an egg? I ate 3 eggs before this and some potatoes.
6 grams?
Yeah, definitely not.
No. Yeah. Eggs and peanut butter are sneaky. You think there's more protein in them than there actually is.
Yeah, you gotta eat a lot of
Uh,
peanut butter. It's only like what 12 grams per 2 tablespoons or tablespoons or something like that. So you'd have to be like hawking it down.
7 or 8 grams per serving.
Oh,
It's
okay.
yeah, it's quite a bit lower.
Yeah.
Um,
So I have to
High
try it
fat.
out and yeah.
But yeah, I mean, even that, like I think it's always interesting when we're at races. The first question I ask people is, um, how much protein you eat in a day? And it's funny, you get two answers. You either get, I have no idea, or you get, I know I'm getting, this much, like 100, some astronomically high number.
Yeah.
And that's the spectrum. Like, there's nobody that actually, very few that are just generally aware, like, oh, I probably should be getting around this when I probably eat around this. It's just either no clue whatsoever or hyper in tune. And the hyper in tune folks are, sub 2%. So, so just getting people to understand they should be eating, 100 plus grams of protein a day, that's a win. And I guarantee anybody that's training, if you went, say, a month of eating 100, or take a calculator, depends on your body weight, but um, that 1.8 grams, that recommendation, if you did
Hmm.
that for a month, you would see noticeable differences in your recovery, and your potential muscle soreness, and
FTP would go up by 100 watts.
yeah, I don't know about that. No, yeah, it's not snake oil, unfortunately.
No, that's
We
fine.
can't guarantee PRs in 7 days or your money back.
Yeah.
I mean, my biggest thing because obviously being a founder and we have a lot of bars in the house and eating them for a while, um, my biggest thing was I just noticed that my bounce back after races was a lot shorter.
Mm.
Normally, if I do a 70.3, it's like a week plus. Whereas, since I started eating, a lot more protein, now that's down to like 4 days. Like I remember I did Eagle Man a couple weeks ago, and then I was back out for a group ride the following Wednesday. My legs were fine.
Yeah.
And it's, obviously everybody's a little bit different, and it's situational, but the trend was, much quicker recovery after the really, really hard sessions than previous.
Well, I've ordered the sample pack, so I'll have to give it a shot.
Yeah.
But 80 grams, I'm just trying to think what that would actually really look like per meal, like having to plan that out. I'm small, like I was 124 pounds this morning. So it's like being able to put in that much food is like
Greek
a
yogurt. Greek yogurt is
trigger.
a great, great source. It's not a ton of calories for the amount of protein that you get.
Yeah.
So like we always say that it's, get 20 to 30 grams at breakfast, lunch, dinner. That's your staples. So that's for you, that would be around 60. And then a snack somewhere either before or after lunch or before or after dinner. And then your post workout snack.
Yeah.
And then you're at 100.
Okay, sweet. I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah.
So with this business, like you've been running it for a while now, you've had the opportunity to be all across the spectrum of the highs, the lows, the okay, are we gonna make it? Maybe we're shutting the doors tomorrow. Maybe you've experienced that a few times. So where are we at on the spectrum right now? What's the mental bandwidth take up right now for you and the business and you and Eric?
We're at the start of the hockey stick, we like to say. So, we did our launch, and just out of fanfare and excitement and friends and family, we saw boom, like, oh, all these orders, like everything's great.
Hmm.
And then, it died down a little bit, came back to reality. And then the last year has really just been, the analogy is just rubbing sticks together, trying to figure out what works, trying to figure out our voice, getting our systems in place. And, we've tried, just being the two of us, we're self-funded, so we don't have outside investment. So we really are bootstrapping this whole thing. We've done a couple of engagements with different agencies and consultants. But to be honest, what we've seen the biggest improvement in anything we've done has been when we've just focused in and learned it ourselves. So like we hired an agency to do our advertising, and it just didn't quite work out. And then we just dug in and said, all right, we're going to learn meta ads. And we're going to learn, the back end of Klaviyo and how to do all the flows. And we screw up all the time. Like we make so many mistakes, but
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
learn what works and what doesn't. And we're slowly starting to inch it up. And then I would say one of our big turning points was um, at the start of this race season. And we started going to these events, and then I noticed, just subtly, but I noticed people coming up to the booth like, "Oh, I've heard of you. I've tried your bars." And then as the summer and as the events went on, it went from "I've heard of you" or "I've tried them" to "Oh, I've bought them" to "I use them." And then we're starting to hear like, "Oh, okay, it's starting to build." Um, and then now it's at the point where we think we've got it dialed in, and it's just a matter of scaling up. And that's the harder part. So, you get to a certain point when it's just the two of you. There's only so many hours in a day. Um, and there's so many things that you want to be doing. Like there's events all over the country. And there's just so many, people that you can reach out to. But um, it's how do we start to scale within our own company to kind of build on the momentum. And I don't have an answer for you yet. We have our 1 year review meeting coming up next week, so I'll come back to you and let you know what we decide. But
Yeah.
I good problems, but growth can be a double-edged sword. So
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. How many people do you have like working under the hood? Is it just you and Eric right now primarily, or
it's Eric, myself,
your wife?
my wife, and then we actually just brought on a another individual part-time to work with us with helping with the teams. And but that's like fractional, like a few hours a week kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's predominantly just Eric and I doing the heavy lifting stuff.
Yeah. What is the biggest gap right now that you see that needs to be fulfilled if money was no object and you were able to just plug something or someone in?
Oh, um, it's a good question. I don't know that there's necessarily a massive glaring gap. It's more the opposite. I guess the gap would be being able to understand signal for noise, because there's just so many opportunities to scale in different directions right now. And it's not to say that any one of them is going to be a guarantee. Like we could double down with Ironman and to go, the official recovery bar of Ironman, and that would be a massive investment. And who's to know if that would work or not? We've had success going to their races and being at the expo and a finish line food. Um, but who's to say that would get watered down if we did it
Yeah.
on a broad scale? So I think it's the gap would be, treading carefully and understanding where to place the bets, um, as opposed to placing all bets.
Yeah.
Because I've
I
seen
ha-
companies do that, and that's almost as worse as not having opportunity at all.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, well, I can imagine even if you did something like with the Iron Man, the ability to track when an order comes in and how that may have been tied back to the influence of being one in their bag or whatever, like that would be that I don't even think that there's a way you could do it
Uh,
unless
so,
yeah,
so that's the world I came from. So digital advertising.
yeah,
Um, and I can tell you it's a $1 billion industry to understand multi-touch attribution. And there are massive companies with incredible resources trying to solve that problem for, the Fortune 100,
yeah.
and it's still not something. So for us to think that we could solve it for little Adra, I think I think
Yeah.
we're a ways away. Maybe
Well,
AI can help that. So
well, you know how they have the air tags? Imagine if you could take that technology and squeeze it down and put it in the packaging.
yeah, put it
That way,
RFID and just start
yeah,
scanning
and
people
it
as they go
tags
by.
their phone whenever they're eating that thing, and
Yeah.
then if they order within 24 to 48 hours, you could like make a link or something like that. I don't know. You'd have to get real
There
creative.
there are there are creepier technologies that exist out there that are tracking you in ways that you like. There are apps that have permission to branch outside their app on your phone and can track everything your phone's doing. And it's not like Google or Apple. It's like, the flashlight app. And you don't realize because you opt in for their terms, and then they can remonetize that data. And they know if you went to Kayak and search for what flight, and then give
Yeah.
that back to, you know, Delta, and then
Yeah.
Delta can pitch you ads.
Yeah. I worked in advertising just for a small publication for a while, selling ads, and got to hear some of these wild stories of the things that go on because it can be quite a dirty industry or just like creepy to the max. So let me ask you, because you have 15 years in this, our phones are listening to us, are they not?
I've never gotten a solid answer from anybody at Meta or Google. Um, so I can't speak to the sort of like always on audio recognition piece, but what I can tell you is that the GPS in your phone is 100% always sending data out.
Yeah.
That's one of the companies I worked at. It was a mobile location company. And all they did was just capture every phone in America and where it went. And they would be able to take you and say, all right, I want anybody that went to Chipotle in the last 3 days, and I'm going to serve them ads for Moe's with a discount code. And then we know that, within a level of certainty, they were inside the Chipotle.
Crazy.
And like that, just extrapolate that level of accuracy and mass scale of data and what you could do with it. Like we've had financial firms come to the company I worked at to ask if we could build them stuff. The government, like it's a whole that's the very, very interesting part of that sector.
Yeah, 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 for sure. Wow, wow. Well, just a couple more questions for you if you still have time.
Yeah, yeah, go for it.
Okay, cool. So, the first one, so being married for, going on 15 years, like you understand the needs, the give and take of a relationship. And then now you're with Eric in a relationship. Some say marriage partnerships are like, or excuse me, business partnerships are like marriages. So are you figuring that out as well? Like, how's that going? Like, are you finding it easy, hard, fun?
Oh no, it's a ton of fun, and you're spot on. You're 100% right. It's the two people I talk to most on the planet right now are my wife and Eric, and it really is. You don't really know someone until you either marry them or start a business with them, because then you really get to see, and it goes both ways. They get to know you, but um, working with him for a couple years on the Power Bar stuff, it's 1 degree removed. And then over the last years, we've really gotten to learn and understand the nuances. And what's interesting about our relationship is we both come from such completely different walks of life and have such completely different perspectives and priorities in terms of what we think is not like important for the business, but like what we rank higher. Um, and it's most say, "Oh man, that's a recipe for disaster." It's actually been one of the reasons for our success because we've mitigated a lot of our blind spots because we both look at completely different directions, but eventually want to achieve the same goal. So like with him, he's very analytical, um, very cerebral, able to work through very complex problems or projects systematically and organized. Um, he has a very scientific mind, and his background really does come from the education sector and the R&D sector. His day to day was talking with Louise Burke, who's the head of sports nutrition science. And, was the head of the Australian Institute of Sport for a number of years. Advises and leads the IOC nutrition panel for the Olympic Committee. Like top, and like that's the company that he would keep. Whereas, for me, coming from the marketing side, it's very consumer centric. It's very like, all that sounds great, but what do people need to hear? What do they want to hear? And what's going to make sense to them? Um, and between the two of us, what we get is a lot of depth from Eric and a lot of sharpening from me. And when we combine it, it ends up being, um, you know, very thoughtful, but grounded in a lot of rich information. Whereas, a lot of other, if it was just me, I don't know that it would be successful because we wouldn't be able, it would be a very shallow sales pitch.
Yeah.
Whereas if it was just Eric, it may not land because we may be talking a different language of what the customer wants to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good to have those opposites.
Yeah. And we also learn what excites him and what excites me are very different. Our
Yeah.
meetings are really funny.
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, we just got this opportunity to, go to this race and do this and do that. And he's like, oh, cool, cool. He's like, I just spoke to this scientist. I was like, oh, cool. And
Yeah. You
they're
guys
both
should.
important, but like what
Yeah.
gets him out of bed and what gets me out of bed are very different.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. You guys should like do a little podcast recording of your annual meetings and publish it out
Oh,
there
I don't know. That'd be pretty boring.
inside of
People
ADDRA.
want to hear that.
Yeah. That's funny. So let me just ask you this, I guess, kind of final question. Going back earlier, we talked about a very vulnerable part of your life and period when you were having trouble even getting up out of bed, and you've come around full circle to that now. If there's one thing I know, it's this life as a constant revisiting of these circles of life, the ups and downs. And there's a lot of beauty in that, because once you go through that cycle a few times, you realize that it only lasts for so long. So for somebody who is maybe in the low point of that cycle right now, and trying to figure out and find a way out, what kind of advice would you give to them?
There's a lot. And it's hard to say like this is the one thing. But the first kind of a framework um, to at least start to look at the problem was the concept of reframing. Because when you're in that state and you're looking at whatever the scenario is of my job's the problem, or my this or my that, you're taking one perspective that's been fueled by everything you've experienced up to that date. And there was this kind of this lesson I read in one of the books I was going through where it's called turning your F's into A's. So fear, frustration, failure. Like those are all very emotional statements, emotional words. So you looking at a situation and say, all right, what am I scared of? What is it about it that's frustrating me? And what does cataclysmic failure actually look like? And then turn it into um, your A's, which now I'm forgetting what the A's were, but it was basically defining out the problem in its most um, negative state, and then turning those like, how can we then look at this in a different way where we're aware of the risk, but we see the opportunity. We have, oh, there it is, awareness, action,
Awareness,
and
action.
accountability or acceptance or something like that. But how can we then turn that into actionable steps we can take to either address or mitigate, and then accept that we've now put this under our own power and we're not under the power of the problem. And just starting to think about that sort of framework helped a ton. Because even if it's something simple as, you know, changing that perspective to, I think I want to get better, or I think I want to just think differently about it. That in itself is a reframing, and that can be the a turning point, right? That can be the thing that all of a sudden it's like, all right, now what could we do, as opposed to everything is shit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. So fear, failure, and frustrations, and then turn that into awareness, action, steps, and acceptance. Is that right?
Acceptance, yeah.
I have to put that in the show notes. That's
There you
of
go.
all of the different practical advice pieces I've asked. That's one that I think stuck with me the most. So that's
There you
beautiful.
go.
Yeah,
Maybe you can use it, man.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's just about taking almost, if you could take yourself out of your own situation, you just look at it from another angle of like, all right, someone forced me to find the silver lining. What would it be? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, well maybe there is something. So I get it. It's not a silver bullet. It's not a be all end all. There's different situations in life. I get that, but I think that's at least somewhat universal, where it could at least help somebody start to move in the right direction.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So then, final question: what does success look like for you in your life?
Oh man, that things continue to be this big slice of progression pie every single day going forward. And I get a lot of flack for this statement where someone says, if you won the lottery tomorrow, what would you do? I would say, I don't want to win the lottery, because the progression, or the, trajectory, and the way that the life is going right now, like, I worked really hard to get to this state. And this state, by the way, like, it's not enviable in all aspects. Like, you're running a startup, so financially it's not very good, for now, hopefully. But in terms of just the return of life experience, like, I would take this any day
Invaluable.
of the week. So as long as, to me, success is I continue to love and enjoy every step from an entrepreneur perspective, progress as an athlete, progress as a father, as a family member, and if we can continue to live this life and things continue to get better, like, that is success. Um, sure, I'd love to build ADDRA up and sell it for, what did RX bar sell for? 600 million? Sure. That
A
would be cool.
billion.
But we don't, that's not a requirement for success. I'll continue to build a successful company that has, a bright future. That's success. That doesn't need this massive exit, though. If there's any prospective investors out there, I'll have a different answer for you. Don't worry.
Yeah. Well, very eloquent put, Matt. Thank you so much for diving in with me and sharing from a vulnerable place on a number of different fronts and telling the story of ADRA. Wish you all the best. I'll make sure to link in the show notes that survey so people
Yeah,
can
yeah, yeah.
try to try the bars. I will definitely be trying, and you even got me in the upsell. I clicked it real quick because I got 4 more bars for $9 or something like
Yeah.
that.
There you go. One click upsell.
That's
Oh
right.
man.
Yeah, I gotta love Shopify or whatever it is you're using.
Awesome,
Cool,
man. It
Matt.
was great to
Yeah,
meet you. I really appreciate you having me on. Like I said, listening to a lot of the episodes, I mean, you've had some hitters on here, and
thanks,
I
man.
was, super honored, and you know feel super grateful to be included in that company.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, man. Thank you so much to Matt for coming on, for being vulnerable and sharing your story. I really appreciated him. Really appreciated you, Matt, for being on the podcast. Make sure to check out the show note links for the survey that you can take on their website for Adra Labs to figure out what kind of protein needs your body has. And yeah, I'm getting some in the mail. Looking forward to trying them along with you guys. Also, check out the show note description for any other links to the newsletter, to checking out the Sway socks. Excuse me, not Sway. That's my old business. The Stupid Question socks. I keep doing that. Yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, subscribe. If you are listening on podcasts, platforms such as Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. If you could like, comment, subscribe, follow, do anything on those platforms, it continues to help grow the pod. Yep. Thank you guys so much for being here. Really appreciate it. And we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.